Welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode number 130 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. We call these episodes Fraternity Foodie because there is nothing like great food to bring people together. We're also always thinking about our new book just released this week. It's called From Letters to Leaders, Creating Impact on Your College Campus and Beyond. It just shot up to #1 on the new release for Amazon for the college and university category. We're blessed beyond belief. Go out and pick that up on your Kindle for only $2.99 right now, or you can have the paperback shipped to you for a very low price. Go check that out. Today, we have with us Rainey Lynch. She is a growth consultant at Delta Kappa Epsilon International Fraternity. She's actually their very first growth consultant, so that is important to know. In this role, she supports the fraternity's commitment to accelerating its growth by coaching chapters who are aspiring to expand their membership through this recruitment process. Before she got to Deke, she served Pi Beta Phi Fraternity for Women as a traveling leadership development consultant. She was teaching collegiate women across the country the skills and the confidence they need to become strong female leaders. She continues to serve the organization as the recruitment advisor for the California new chapter at Loyola Marymount University. Now, this is what I love about Rainey. She is ambitious. She is hardworking. She faces each new chapter of her life with enthusiasm. And this is why she makes the perfect guest on the Fraternity Foodie. Welcome to the show, Rainey.
Thank you. I feel like I need to be like running down the aisle, high-fiving people or something. That was such a fun introduction.
It's so much fun. You need intro music. I want high fives. I want to dance. I want everything. Very cool. All right. So I want to make sure that our listeners, they get to know you a little bit and some of your background. I think that's always important. You chose Loyola Marymount University for your undergraduate experience, and you did very well there, to be quite honest. You graduated magna cum laude. So why was Loyola Marymount the right place for you?
Yeah, I literally get like butterflies every time I talk about LMU. It's the best place in the world. I always joke and say that we're the happiest place on earth. We're like an hour north of Disneyland, but I'm like, who needs Disneyland when you have LMU? Like, plot me down on campus, I'll be good to go. But I really think that it's kind of a funny story, actually. LMU was really not on my radar when I was applying to colleges in high school. My mom and I knew that I was gonna be in California for college. And so my mom and I did a couple like visits where we would go and visit a bunch of schools in Southern California, a bunch of schools in Northern California. And LMU was actually the one school that I applied to that I hadn't visited prior to applying, which is funny because then of course that's the one that I ended up going to. But I think LMU really was the perfect fit for me. I think that the community at LMU, I just fit so well into the culture at LMU. I really feel like I was able to find my people there, and the environment just really empowered me to pursue like all of the different passions that I have. So I was able, my degree is in English, so I was able to, pursue my interests in reading and writing. I played on the women's club volleyball team, so I was able to get that, sports fix in there. I was editor-in-chief of a magazine on campus. I was able to work in the photography lab on campus. And then of course I was able to join Pi Beta Phi and get really involved and find my passion for fraternity and sorority there. So I really feel like LMU just allowed me to do all of those things. I'm so grateful for that. I think LMU too is a really purpose-driven community. I think we do a really good job of we're a Jesuit university, and so I think that we're really able to remember all of our Jesuit values in every aspect of campus life, regardless of what you're doing. That's always something that I think grounds us in like why we're doing the work that we're doing, why we're in the classes that we're taking, why we're in the communities that we're involved in. And so I think that I'm the type of person that is really attracted to value and purpose and like what is the reason why are we here. And I think LMU is the perfect community for people like that. So yeah, I miss it. I haven't been to campus since I graduated in 2019, so I'd do anything to go back.
Wow, what a commercial for LMU. LMU, if you're listening right now and you want a copy of that clip so you can put that on your website and get more students to apply, I mean, talk about the best commercial, the best advertisement you could have for LMU. I mean, you killed it in terms of grades. You were involved in everything on campus, and you can't wait to go back today as an alumnus. I mean, what more do you want? That's awesome. I absolutely love that. And you were also chapter president of Pi Phi at the California New Chapter. So what was special about this particular chapter, this particular group of women?
Yeah, I'm California New's #1 cheerleader. I will always advocate for the women in this chapter. Going through recruitment, I remember exactly where I was sitting in the room, exactly who I was talking to when I decided that Pi Phi was the place for me. It was day 2 of recruitment during philanthropy round, and our philanthropy is focused on children's literacy. So that's something that really stood out to me as an English major. But I remember the exact woman that I was talking to. She was chapter president the year before, like she was ending her term right as I was joining as a new member. And she actually ended up going on to be a leadership development consultant for headquarters as well. So kind of fun, like full circle, that she is like one of the big reasons why I chose Pi Phi, and then I ended up kind of following in her footsteps. So she's amazing. But I think the women of California New are so just passionate and driven and well-rounded and caring. And I think supportive is the biggest like chapter specific value that I really appreciate from these women. I really like the amount of support that I see my sisters giving to each other, not only like when we were collegiate women, but you know, all of my sisters as alumni still today. And the support that they gave me personally when I was, you know, they trusted me to lead them as chapter president. They gave me so much encouragement when I was applying to be a leadership development consultant. Even now when I'm serving as a recruitment advisor on the alumni advisory committee, I'm super grateful that this opportunity kind of presented itself to me right as I was transitioning off of the leadership development consultant team. And so this past year, back in January, we were doing virtual recruitment. And so obviously that was a brand new experience for all of us. And the amount of support, like I was there to mentor and support these women as they were going through recruitment process and like bringing new sisters into the chapter. But even then, when I was in the role of like advising and supporting them, they still gave me so much support. And I was not like necessarily expecting that, just because I was there to support them. But they, like, even when we were on like our Zoom doing all of our behind the scenes stuff, they were sending like sweet messages like, thank you so much, like you're so helpful, blah, blah, blah. There was even a woman that when I was a senior, she was going through recruitment, and I talked to her during recruitment, and she ended up joining Pi Phi, and she sent the sweetest note in our Zoom chat about like such a fun full circle of I recruited her and now I was back helping them with recruitment. And so it's just the amount of support that they continue to give each other and me is like warms my heart. When I was chapter president, I had kind of like a motto or a slogan that I used all the time. I would sign my chapter emails with it, and it was just kind of I used it to remind myself of why I was in that role, and I used it to remind my sisters why I was in that leadership role as well. And my motto was, I love you, Cal New, when I do this for you, which is cute because it like rhymes, but that really was like everything I did and continue to do is because of the woman in this chapter. And I like truly would not be where I am today without all of their support. So they're just so special to me. I love them so much. And I'm so glad that I'm able to like continue working with them and like have a connection with them, even if I wasn't like in the chapter at the same time as them. So yeah, they're my favorite ladies. They're amazing.
That's amazing. I mean, just incredible. What a great story. I know how humbling that is when you get chosen to be chapter president. I served in that role, and I know how humbling that is when you get chosen to work for your national headquarters. You know, I was also in that kind of a role, and you're right about the support. I think, there was tons of support as an undergraduate, certainly, but that extends for life. So the good news is, that continued for me and other fraternity members and other sorority members. For me, it's been, over 20 years now, getting close to 25 years. And just, this morning, I got all kinds of wonderful email congratulations on the book, all from brothers that, I went to college with. And here 25 years later, they're still supporting me. It never leaves, which is wonderful. And it means the world to you when you still have that support. So kudos to you for finding the right fit at California New Chapter. Sounds like it was everything you ever wanted and then some. So that's absolutely wonderful. And you were also hired as a traveling leadership development consultant for Pi Phi. You traveled to 29 different chapters there. And so talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you did there for Pi Phi. And also I'm curious about, how do you assess a chapter's needs as a traveling leadership development consultant? I think that's important too.
Yeah, so I think what's fun and intimidating all at the same time about being a leadership development consultant is that when it comes to like, what do you do in your role, there's like endless possibilities for what you can be doing. It totally depends on the chapter that you go to, the time of year, it varies a lot. And so I think that's something that's really cool about the position. And I'm sure other consultants for other organizations feel the same way, is that you really get a really good feeling of like the entire operations of the whole organization. I would go into a chapter and I'd be helping them with recruitment. I'd be helping them with officer training. The year that I was in LDC, we were introducing a new like leadership organizational structure. So changing the way that our executive council was set up. So I went in and helped like implement that process. I'd help them with risk management. I'd present like leading with values seminars and workshops. So all the things that you can think of that go into being a sorority chapter is what LDCs help with. It's basically everything. And I think when it comes to assessing a chapter's needs, some of that, it depends. For being an LDC specifically, it depends on the type of visit that you're doing. So if you're doing a recruitment visit, you'd obviously be focusing on recruitment, versus if it's a routine visit, it's kind of more well-rounded. But I think the most important thing when it comes to assessing a chapter's needs is really just building a connection with the chapter leaders and listening to them. I think the biggest mistake that you can make in any position where you're working with a student, honestly, is coming in and just like talk to them without like letting them talk to you first. These women and like the men that I work with now, even with Delta Kappa Epsilon, even if they don't necessarily mean to, like they will tell you what they need if you give them the opportunity to speak and if you really intentionally listen to them. And so I think that's honestly the biggest, I guess, tip that I have for people that are working with chapters is just listen to them, give them that opportunity to tell them what you need, and then, you can go from there. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing, is just listening to the chapter members.
I think that's great. And I totally agree. I think from the headquarters perspective, when you have all of these chapters that you're working with, you go in with these preconceived ideas, these preconceived notions. Maybe you speak to the leadership development consultant who had the job before to try to figure out what's going on in this particular chapter, or you'll read through the notes or whatever, and you're doing your homework. But at the end of the day, you just have to go there and listen. Like I figured that out very quickly. Whatever I thought that I was going to be going to work on at a particular chapter, sometimes that went right out the window when I realized that there was another need that was much more pressing, or we totally got it wrong in terms of what we thought they needed.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to be adaptable and just ready for anything that they're going to throw at you. And I think that's like a good skill that anyone in this type of position learns, is being adaptable and being flexible, and, kind of rolling with the punches.
Yeah, you really have to roll with it there. And, I think it's kind of interesting because you're currently serving as Deke's very first growth consultant. So I'm wondering, how has that shift to a men's fraternity been for you? And how is that different from what you've done before at Pi Phi?
Yeah, so it's definitely was a little bit of a learning curve right at the beginning. And, I'm still learning every day. Obviously, just men and women are very different. We communicate in different ways. We're motivated by different things. just the way that we like even just organize ourselves. I feel like in my experience, the women have like these really structured planners, and the men will just like, you got to text them 10 times, like, don't forget about our meeting today. And so I think that's one of the biggest like differences that I've noticed. From like a structure standpoint, especially since I'm helping Deke specifically with recruitment, obviously the way that the men recruit is very different from the way that the women recruit. The women have all of these structures that are put in place from National Panhellenic Conference. Each campus has their own like set of recruitment rules. Each headquarters, national organization has their own policies. And then even further, each chapter has their own kind of set of norms and traditions that they do. Versus the men, they don't have as much like oversight or policies or rules to like tell them like this is how recruitment goes. So it's definitely been a learning curve to figure out, like when I was in LDC, I'd jump into a chapter's recruitment, and like even if I was jumping in on like day 2, like I could figure it out pretty quickly. But with the men, like they're kind of tasked with doing it all themselves. Some of it depends on the university. Some universities do have a more structured recruitment for the men. But for the most part, they're just kind of like winging it a little bit. So I think that that's been something that's fun and exciting about the job for me, is that there's a lot more room for creativity with it, and coming in and really working with the chapter, figuring out who they are, like what's our brand, how are we going to sell this experience to the PNMs that we're talking to, and how can we have fun with it. Like there's so many different things that you can do for like men's recruitment, especially if we really focus on like a 365 recruitment approach or model. You have the whole year to be talking to these PNMs and like inviting them to join your chapter. And so it's there's a lot more room for creativity. It's definitely been a little bit of a learning curve, but I think it's been a really good learning experience as well.
So in summary, a lot less rules for an NIC organization versus Panhellenic. That's really, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And I agree with you. I think I like the creativity. I'm a creative kind of guy, and I like to take each chapter, individually, because they all have unique parts to them. One chapter could be really great with academics. One chapter, of Deke has the Bushes, our alumni. So we're gonna sell that as the reason to join Deke on this campus. And so everybody's unique, and I think that if you're creative, that's exactly the space that you want to be in, because it's something new every single time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been, fun to work with them and figure out, especially during the pandemic. Obviously, it's kind of looking at it positively forced us to be even more creative than we would need to be in like a normal non-pandemic setting. So that's just added like an extra level of excitement. Glass half full.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Right now, we are living through this pandemic. I just got the Johnson & Johnson shot a couple of days ago, so I'm feeling good, totally recovered from that. And so, it's obviously unusual times, to say the least. What kind of advice can you give our listeners right now who want to grow the size of their organization, but they're really struggling in this virtual environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think honestly, obviously, I would not like wish for this pandemic to ever happen again. But I think honestly, it came at a good time for our organizations, because I think it's forced us, now that we aren't able to do kind of like the fluff of being in a fraternity or sorority, like the social events or the brotherhood and sisterhood events, or, whatever it is, which obviously those are, valuable aspects of the experience. But I think that going through the pandemic, especially trying to recruit through the pandemic, we've been forced to really boil this experience down to its core and reevaluate, like, why is this important? Why are we here? What are we doing? And how can we cater this to really like serve our purpose? And so I think when it comes to like advice for chapters that are looking to grow but are struggling in this virtual setting, I think it's really important to focus on like why we're here. What is the purpose of your organization? What can you provide to your PNMs if they were to accept a bid and become a member? So And in order to do that, I think it's really important to focus on building genuine and authentic relationships with the PNMs that we're talking to. Be vulnerable with them, be honest with them. They are looking for community more than ever right now because they're not able to find that community on campus as much as they usually are, because they're just like not on campus literally for a lot of schools. And so I think it's really important to just focus on the genuine relationships that you're building. And I think even beyond that, so not only building relationships with the PNMs that will hopefully be a member of your chapter, but also focus on maintaining the relationships that you currently have with your current brothers and sisters. I think retention is just as important to growth as recruitment is. We could be doing amazing during recruitment, but if we're losing half of our members after recruitment, then we're not actually growing as an organization. And so I think it's important right now to focus on, staying in touch with your current brothers and sisters, checking in on them, seeing how they are, and, making sure that everyone is still enjoying the member experience that you're able to provide, which right now is all focused on community and brotherhood and sisterhood. I think it's all about relationships right now and trying to build and maintain those.
I love it. A couple of the key words being genuine and being vulnerable. Those were two things that I heard in your answer that I think is really kind of key if you want to get good results right now in a virtual environment. So I love that answer. I thought that was great. The other thing is collaboration across different councils is something that so many fraternity and sorority communities around the country struggle with. So how can we increase collaboration with other councils?
Yeah, I think this is super important, and I agree that it's something that is lacking at a lot of campuses. I think honestly, the first step, again, kind of going back to building those genuine relationships, is building those genuine relationships with members of the different councils. I think a lot of the times it's easy to just focus on, your chapter or your council, and I think some of it is that we just don't know each other and we don't have as many there's usually a good amount of opportunity to connect with other Panhellenic organizations, or to connect with other IFC organizations, or to connect with other NPHC chapters if you're one of those chapters. So I think something that's important from a campus professional standpoint, I think our campus professionals need to work on being really proactive and intentional when it comes to providing those opportunities for the councils to mingle with each other. Because if we don't know each other and if we don't know anything about, the other council or the other chapters in that council, it makes it difficult to, do things with them if we don't know who they are and why they're here. So I think we have to focus on building those relationships with them. And then beyond that, I think it's important too to realize that if we're going to be sustainable as a fraternity and sorority life community, overall, I think we have to remember that all of us we have to work together in order to stay relevant on our college campuses. And so if we stay in our lane and only if we're sitting here in sorority world and we're only focused on the future of sorority life and just leave the fraternities off to the side, fraternities and sororities tend to be looped together. So even if we're focusing on moving forward, if we're letting the fraternities fall behind or vice versa, then that's going to bring us back too. So I think we have to realize that we have to work together if we're going to move forward together. Otherwise, we're just going to, fizzle out, which is not ideal.
Right. I 100% agree with you. I think, Panhellenic is doing a wonderful job during the pandemic. I mean, they're finding ways to make it work. And I think the women are really embracing the virtual environment for the most part. But I think the men sometimes are struggling in the virtual environment and building that connection over a Zoom. They would much prefer to have something in person, I think, to a man. And so it's interesting, but I agree with you. I'd like to see greater collaboration, not just between Panhellenic and IFC and helping the men a little bit, in terms of, getting recruitment numbers up and having that brotherhood, but across other councils as well. I think about NPHC and making sure that ultimately when we leave college, that we have the ability to draw upon all of these different contacts to develop our network, to start a new company and have more customers, and to, you know, be able to just network, find jobs, careers, internships, whatever. And I think the bigger your network is beyond your own council, the more successful you're going to be at the end of the day. So I think it works in our favor if we take that leap to go and find somebody from another council, to develop that relationship, to maybe learn about a different culture other than your own, you know, and to celebrate all the great history that all of our organizations have. So anyway, so I think about some of that stuff. The other thing that I think about is collaboration when we're talking about chapters. And, you know, so many of our chapters today, they really focus on their own chapter naturally. And I think Deke absolutely sees this because, you know, Deke has some very historic chapters with some incredible famous alumni, presidents, I mean, you name it. So there's a lot of chapter culture and chapter history. But most people are not involved with the national headquarters. And if we look at our total brotherhood or total sisterhood population, a small percentage of that will actually attend a national event or a national conference. So how do we get our members to work with other chapters of the same organization, share best practices between chapters, and then keep consistent branding all the way through the organization and really work together towards our common mission, when primarily their focus is really on their chapter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To answer this question, I feel it makes me think of like my own experience in Pi Phi and like getting to where I am now, and thinking back on like, okay, why was I one that ended up, you know, understanding the bigger picture and getting more involved and obviously like working for headquarters and stuff like that. And I think for me, it all started with like small, like leadership opportunities. I think is honestly one of the most important things. If we want our members to get more involved and work with other chapters, we have to present them with leadership opportunities that will allow them to connect with other chapters, with the, you know, national headquarters, or international headquarters. So like thinking back on my experience, I started off as a chair of a committee, and then from there, because of that experience, I was able to go to convention after my sophomore year of college. And at convention, I really got to see all of the undergraduates from all of our chapters. It was our like 150th birthday too, so it was all fun and exciting. And I was able to see all of the alumni engagement as well. There were probably honestly more alumni at that convention than there were collegians. And then from there, that inspired me to be chapter president, and that led me to be a leadership development consultant, which led me to just be more interested in higher education, and now I'm here with Deke. And so for me, how I got here all falls back to like that first leadership opportunity that I had. And so I think if we want our members to be more involved, like talk to other chapters and get a better idea for like the bigger picture of these organizations, I think we just have to work our hardest to get them into those leadership opportunities that will, you know, empower them to do more than like just their chapter. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And honestly, from a recruitment perspective too, I think some of it like starts with recruitment. We have to be recruiting the men and the women that want that type of experience, that want an organization that is, you know, large and all over the country and in Canada, and that has a big alumni network, versus if we're recruiting those types of people that are looking for that experience, it's easier to like get them to understand that once they're a member, versus if we're only recruiting people that, you know, are going to be here just to party for 4 years, then like it's going to be really difficult to get them to the point where they see the bigger picture and the purpose of the organization. So I think, honestly, I think that everything that has to do with fraternity and sorority life starts with recruitment. That's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about it. So yeah, I think that's an important thing to remember as well.
Yeah, you're so right. I think it does. I think every chapter president out there that's listening right now that has a problem, whatever your problem is, you can fix it with recruitment. Rainey is 100% right with that. If it's GPA, then put in a requirement that says that you have to have above a 3.0 in order to get a bid into our fraternity. If you're struggling with, I don't know, your budget, you don't have enough money in the bank, go out and recruit more. And guess what? Your budget just got bigger and your treasurer is a lot happier. I think a lot of problems can be fixed with recruitment. And I agree with you. If we're recruiting people for the right reasons, i.e. not social events, entirely, then I do think they're going to be more involved on a national level, wanting to go to national conferences, wanting to go to, leadership opportunities, leadership development, et cetera, et cetera. So it really does. It starts all with recruitment. You're 100% right with that. And your top 5 Clifton strengths: input, connectedness, discipline, intellection, and belief. So why are those types of assessments important for college students, and specifically important for those working in teams such as fraternities and sororities?
Yeah, I love any type of like those types of assessments. I think they're really valuable, and they're just kind of like fun because you get to learn more about yourself. And honestly, I think that's part of the reason why they're so important for, I think, everyone, but especially for those in fraternity and sorority life. Because I think before you can understand and work with other people successfully, I think you have to understand yourself. And so I think that these assessments do a pretty good job of like helping you become more self-aware and figure out, what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your motivations are, what your communication style is, all of that kind of fun stuff. Because if you don't know those things about yourself, it makes it difficult to, work with other people. I think especially I think one of the most important like qualities or traits that these assessments can like teach people is your specific communication style. I think communication is so important. Like if you can't communicate with other people on your team, you're literally not going to be able to get anything done. And so I think when it comes to communication or miscommunication, I think when I see it a lot of times it's not so much like, sometimes it is just a straight up lack of communication. But I think a lot of the times it's not so much a lack of communication, it's more of just differing communication styles that aren't like meshing up together. And so I think it's really important when you're starting on a team, especially like if you're a chapter leader on the executive council, or if you're, new for headquarters staff or on a campus setting, whatever it is, be communicative about communication. If you learn more about, reflect on yourself, figure out how you communicate, and then talk to your teammates about how they communicate as well. I like to think of it sometimes like different languages. Like if let's say like I'm speaking French and then my, teammate is over here speaking Italian. If we haven't communicated about like, hey, we speak different languages, we're not going to be able to understand each other. I don't know if that was the best example, but if you communicate and then you realize, oh, we both also speak English, so like let's just communicate in English and then it'll make more sense. I don't know if that was the best example, but I think it gets the point across. I think it's just important to know these things about yourself and know those things about your teammates so that you can successfully work together.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, in your chapter, I think for the most part, we're all going to be speaking English, I think, in North America for the most part. And there are other languages that are in there, but you're absolutely right. I mean, everyone has different communication styles. The sooner you pick up on that with an assessment where you actually get to know your members and what their needs are, as a leader, you got to know those things because everybody is different in your chapter. And if you communicate with them all the same way, then ultimately you're not going to reach your ultimate goal because they are all different, all have different needs. But hopefully people will look into those assessments and do that as a chapter, do that as an exec board, et cetera. You also went out and got your mental health first aid certification, which I think is a really wonderful program. I happen to be certified in that as well. And I think it's something that more students should take advantage of, especially today, given the pandemic. So what is mental health first aid? How could that help our fraternities and sororities?
Yeah, so that's something that I was able to do as a member of Pi Phi's leadership development consultant team last year or 2 years ago. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity. But so what mental health first aid is, it's like a training program that teaches people how to help other people that may be experiencing a mental health problem or crisis or something like that. And so I think something that's important to note about it is similarly to like, let's look at first aid, like medical first aid. If I'm certified in medical first aid or CPR or whatever it is, if someone's in need, I go and ask if they need help. I can, give them a Band-Aid, prop their foot up, whatever I need to do to help them. However, that does not make me a doctor. I am not like qualified to actually help like solve their problem for them. And so it's the same for mental health first aid. If you're certified in mental health first aid, you're able to like assist in those situations. But that doesn't make you a psychologist or a psychiatrist or, any type of professional. And so I think part of the job is, handling the situation as well as you can, and then referring them to a professional who can really provide them with the support that they need. I think that this is something that could be really valuable for fraternity and sorority members, especially this year with the pandemic. I know that we've been experiencing like a mental health crisis in this country, and the pandemic has only made it worse. And I think especially on college campuses, but for our fraternity and sorority chapters, again, our chapters are all about community and sisterhood and brotherhood and friendship. And so I think in order to be the best like brothers and sisters to each other, we need to be able to support each other through everything. So we need to support each other through like not only like our leadership positions or other endeavors within the chapter operations, but we also need to be able to support each other through our academics. We need to support each other through, like family emergencies, health crises and mental health crises as well. And so I think it's really important that our fraternities and sororities are able to be open and vulnerable about this topic, because it's super important. I think that's something that I've noticed too, switching from like working with sororities to working with DEAC, like the fraternity. I think that the women tend to be a little bit more open about talking about mental health and different things like that, whereas the men tend to be a little bit more closed off. There were so many times when I was working as a leadership development consultant for Pi Phi where I would sit in a meeting and a woman would just she would just totally open up about her experience. Sometimes they would like cry in meetings, and that's what I'm there for. I'm there to provide them with support, not only as like a chapter leader, but also just as like a human and as a woman. But that's not something that I see so much with the men. Part of it might just be because all my interactions with them have been virtual, so that's definitely a different setting. But I think it's important, especially for our fraternity men, to be more comfortable talking about mental health, because it's super important. DEAC does a lot of work with Movember during the month of November, which, talks about and advocates for men's mental health and physical health as well. So I think it's something that DEAC does a good job of like during the month of November. But I think it's definitely something that everyone should work on like over the course of the entire year, because it's definitely a super important topic.
Yeah, men could definitely use some more help, I think, in that area, just working on communication skills and being able to verbalize some of these things. One of the things that I really like about the mental health first aid program is that you literally practice this with other students that are going through the certification program to say, hey, are you thinking of killing yourself? And, having that conversation and being able to verbalize that and practice it, I think makes it a little bit easier when the time comes. And so sometimes I know, men, myself included, sometimes, especially in college, you just kind of struggle with how to say those things. You might be thinking, but you're not necessarily knowing like how to have that conversation. And I think mental health first aid really helps you to practice it, to use it in role-playing situations, so that way when the time comes, you're like, I got this. I know how to say it. So that's really, really important. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. And, we do love good food here at Fraternity Foodie. So I'm wondering that when you're in the Dallas, Texas area, which I get to quite often, what's your favorite restaurant there and what do you like to order?
Yeah, so I'm actually vegetarian, which is like a sin in Texas, apparently. And my father definitely thinks that I'm like crazy. But yeah, so being vegetarian, I always have people like, oh, I'm from Dallas or I'm from Texas. And they're like, oh my gosh, how's the barbecue? I'm like, I wouldn't know. I don't eat it. um, but I think my favorite restaurant in Dallas is Tzatzikis. It's a Greek place.
Sure.
And it's so good. They have like a little hummus platter that you can order at the beginning, and they have a really good vegetarian platter. I'm like a big fan of like Mediterranean and Greek food. And they have like during COVID they've expanded their patio, so they have a nice little like cute ambiance out there. So yeah, Tzatzikis is probably one of my favorites in Dallas.
Yeah, I like that place. That is a very good restaurant. My family goes there all the time. My daughter is vegetarian as well, so she's also a fan of that restaurant, just like you are, for the same reasons. But yeah, here I am thinking you're going to say barbecue, and then you go in a completely different direction, which I love, which is what makes the show great. All right, so if our listeners, if they want to connect with you on social media, perhaps they have some questions to ask you. Maybe it's about Pi Phi or Deek, or just some questions about recruitment that you might be able to help with. What's the best place for them to go and connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a growth consultant Instagram account. It's at Deek and then _ growth consultant. And Deek is just DKE, the letters. So yeah, you can find me there. Feel free to follow me, DM me, let me know if you need any help. I am here to provide it.
I love it. Instagram at Deek _ growth consultant. This has been so much fun. Let me tell you, Rainey, I've had so much fun getting to know you. I know we connected a while back on LinkedIn, and now we finally get a chance to sit down and have a conversation. And this lived up to the billing. It was everything I thought it was going to be and then some. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with our listeners. I had a lot of fun. And I tell you what, I wish you nothing but success at Deek. We're always here. I'm a big supporter of yours. Let me know how I can help and continued success.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. And I definitely appreciate all of your support and all of the work that you're doing for this community. So yeah, thank you.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And to our listeners, if you like this interview with Rainey, make sure that you like this on social media. Make sure you share that with other women in Pi Phi, with members of Deek, or anybody in the fraternity or sorority community that needs to hear Rainey's words. And we hope to see you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.